In 1968, 23 years after her 5 children vanished, Jennie Sodder opened her mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his 20s. Dark, curly hair, dark eyes, and a familiar tilt to the eyebrow. On the back, someone had written 4 words: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Jennie Sodder never doubted it. That was her son. The son the state of West Virginia had declared dead 23 years earlier. The son whose body was never found, because on Christmas morning, 1945, a fire destroyed the Sodder home, and 5 children disappeared without a trace. No bones, no teeth, no proof they ever burned at all. This is the story of that night, and the questions that have outlived everyone who lived through it. The Sodder children. Before we begin, if you enjoy real mysteries and unsolved disappearances, consider leaving a like and subscribing to Molodix. Now let's step back to the night it all began. Fayetteville, West Virginia, a small coal town in the Appalachian Hills. By December of 1945, George Sodder had built a life there that most immigrants only dreamed of. He had arrived from Sardinia, Italy at 13 years old, alone, with almost nothing. By his 40s, he ran a successful coal trucking business and owned a comfortable 2-story home on the edge of town. He and his wife, Jennie, had 10 children. Their oldest son, Joe, was away serving in the Army. The other 9 were home for Christmas Eve. The war was over. The country was celebrating its first peacetime Christmas in years. For the Sodders, it should have been an ordinary, joyful night. It was the last night they would ever be a complete family. Just after midnight, Jennie Sodder was still awake, tidying the house, when the phone rang. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, though asking for a name Jennie didn't recognize. Laughter and clinking glasses echoed in the background. Jennie told her she had the wrong number and hung up. But she noticed something strange. The lights were still on downstairs. The curtains hadn't been drawn. Doors she always locked were unlocked. She dismissed it. It was Christmas Eve. The house was full of children. She went to bed. Sometime around 1 in the morning, a noise woke her. Something heavy hitting the roof, then rolling. She didn't investigate. A short while later, she woke again, this time to the smell of smoke. George's office downstairs was on fire. What happened next unfolded in a matter of minutes, but every minute would later be picked apart for the rest of the family's lives. George, Jennie, and 4 of the children, Marion, John, George Jr., and toddler Sylvia, made it out of the house. 5 did not. Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie, 8, and Betty, 5, all asleep upstairs. George tried to get back inside. He broke a window, cutting his arm badly enough to leave a permanent scar. He ran for the ladder he kept propped against the house every single night. It wasn't there. He ran for his coal trucks parked just feet from the burning building, thinking he could back one up to the wall and climb onto the roof. Neither would start, despite having run perfectly the day before. Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department. The line reached only an operator who couldn't connect the call. Another neighbor drove into town to find the fire chief in person. The Fayetteville Fire Department was 2 miles away. It did not arrive until 8 o'clock that morning. By then, the house was a smoking pit. The 5 children were gone. The official explanation came quickly: faulty wiring. State police and fire officials concluded the blaze had started in that ground floor wiring and burned so completely, so fast, that it consumed everything and everyone inside. George disputed it immediately. He had recently had the house rewired for a new stove, and the power company had inspected and approved it. In the weeks leading up to the fire, he said, the lights in the house had never even flickered. There was a deeper problem, though, one that would haunt the case for decades. Fire investigators searched through the ashes for only about an hour before declaring the search complete. They found no bones, no teeth, no recognizable remains of any of the 5 children. Officials explained this by theorizing the fire had burned hot enough to cremate the bodies entirely. Fire experts the Sodders later consulted disagreed. A house fire, even a severe one, typically leaves behind bone fragments. Cremation ovens designed for that exact purpose require far higher sustained temperatures. Over a much longer duration. Jennie tested this theory herself. She burned animal bones in her stove at high heat for hours and found that recognizable fragments still remained. Weeks after the fire, the state issued death certificates for all 5 children, ruling the cause of death as fire or suffocation. Despite there being no physical remains to examine, George and Jennie refused to accept it, and soon, they weren't the only ones who doubted the official story. What followed was 2 decades of leads, sightings, and unexplained details. Some substantiated, many not. All of them documented at the time. The wrong number call. Investigators never identified the caller. The family always considered it suspicious that the house appeared to have been surveilled that night. A car had reportedly been seen watching the children after school in the weeks prior. A pre-fire threat. Months earlier, a life insurance salesman had reportedly warned George that his house would go up in smoke. The warning was allegedly connected to comments George had made, criticizing Benito Mussolini's fascist government in his native Italy. George was known locally for his outspoken opposition to Mussolini. The severed phone line. Fire officials later found that the phone line running to the house had been cut. Not burned, cut cleanly, consistent with a knife or tool, roughly 14 feet above the ground, too high to have fallen naturally. The missing ladder. It was eventually found days later, thrown down an embankment away from the house, not where George always kept it, a block and tackle. A neighbor reported seeing a man carrying away a heavy chain and pulley device from the Sodder property during the fire, equipment that could have been used to remove the ladder or hinder rescue. Witness sightings. In the weeks and years after the fire, several people came forward. A woman running a tourist stop near Charleston said she saw the missing children in a passing car. On the morning of the fire, they were reportedly with adults who appeared to be of Italian descent. A hotel employee in Charleston reported seeing children resembling the Sodders. About a week later, they were accompanied by adults who avoided speaking with hotel staff. None of these sightings were ever confirmed. The private investigation. Convinced of foul play, George hired private investigators over the years, including a local investigator named C.C. Tinsley. One investigator, later hired to follow a lead in Kentucky, disappeared after collecting his fee. he was never heard from again. The billboard, for nearly 40 years. The Sodders maintained a large billboard along Route 16 near Fayetteville. It displayed the children's photographs, alongside a standing reward for information. The billboard eventually became a regional landmark. Generations of local residents grew up seeing it. The photograph. Then, in the late 1960s, that envelope finally arrived. Inside was the photograph of a young man Jennie and George believed looked remarkably like Louis. As an adult, it had been postmarked from Kentucky. There was no return address, no way to identify the sender. None of it was ever proven, and none of it was ever disproven either. Over the past 80 years, several explanations have competed for the truth. Each is supported by real evidence, and each has real weaknesses. Theory 1. The children died in the fire. This remains the official and most straightforward explanation. Wiring fires were common in the 1940s, especially in older homes with add-on electrical systems. Panic, smoke inhalation, and a rapidly spreading blaze could all explain a tragedy where there was simply no time to escape. Its greatest weakness is the evidence gap. No identifiable remains were recovered. A later excavation of the site did uncover small bone fragments. A pathologist estimated they belonged to a teenager, around 14 or 15 years old. George rejected that conclusion. He argued the bones were unburned and had been found in a location inconsistent with the layout of the house. Some researchers have also suggested, without confirmation, that the fragments may have originated elsewhere, possibly from a nearby former cemetery site. Theory 2. Kidnapping, possibly tied to organized crime or political retaliation. This was the Sodders' lifelong belief. They pointed to the pre-fire threats, the disabled vehicles, the missing ladder, the cut phone line, and the witness sightings. To the family, the pattern seemed far too coordinated to be a coincidence. Its weakness is equally important. No single piece of evidence proves a kidnapping, and several key witnesses were never formally cross-examined or independently verified. Theory 3. Investigative failure. A more measured theory suggests the case was simply mishandled from the very beginning. A small-town department with limited resources but who searched the ashes too quickly, reached a conclusion too soon, and never seriously pursued the family's leads. This theory doesn't explain the disabled trucks or the missing ladder, but it does help explain the rushed investigation and the premature death certificates. After decades of investigation, debate, and speculation, one fact remains unchanged. No single theory fully explains every piece of evidence, and perhaps that is exactly why the mystery still remains unsolved. George Sodder died in 1969, still driving from place to place, chasing leads that never resolved. Jennie kept the billboard standing until 1989, the year of her own death. She never stopped hoping that someone driving down Route 16 would recognize one of those faces and finally make the call. Their youngest surviving daughter, Sylvia, spent much of her adult life trying to reopen the case. She worked with fire investigators and journalists well into the 2000s, before her death in 2021. To this day, no one has definitively proven whether Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty Sodder died in their home. on Christmas morning 1945, or whether they lived out entire lives somewhere else, under other names, with no memory, or perhaps every memory of the family they were taken from. What we know for certain is smaller than what we don't. A fire, a missing ladder, 5 names and with no bodies attached to them, and a photograph sitting in a drawer in West Virginia of a stranger who might have been someone's son. If stories like this stay with you long after the screen goes dark, the unanswered ones, the ones history never quite closes, consider subscribing to Molodix. We tell these stories carefully because the people behind them were real. So we'll leave you with the same question. The Sodders never stopped asking, what do you believe happened to those 5 children? Tell us in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay unsettled.